I'm Chris Howard, CIO at Slingshot. I've been in the software industry for over 20 years now, mainly focused on building products. I've been with Slingshot for the last 2 years and have brought my experience with Lean UX to the organization. Slingshot has been around since 2005. Our team is a blend of strategists, developers, designers, and we focus on transforming ideas into reality. We've worked with a number of companies from Heaven Hill, Churchill Downs, to Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago. So as consultants, we've worked with a lot of different companies and industries. With that experience, we've encountered a number of common pitfalls. The first being involving the customer minimally in the project. Second, wasting resources on unnecessary features. Third, celebrating time and budget success instead of actual outcomes. And last and worst is that the envisioned solution doesn't actually solve the problem at hand. Apple's known for creating products that are innovative, clean, and simple. And to give you an example of a real-world solution that I think came up short from a user experience standpoint, we have the iPod Shuffle. And here on this slide, you can see an excerpt from the actual Apple user manual. So to play or pause, you click the center button. To advance to the next track, you double-click the center button. To fast forward, you double-click and hold the center button. To look at the previous track, you triple-click the center button within 6 seconds of the track starting. So obviously, there's a huge dependence on the center button. And I would say that it's an overly complex device to use, something that's uncommon for an Apple product. So next, we have the B-Twine activity tracker. And with this particular product, as a customer, you have a wearable device that you wear on your wrist, and you're able to share access to that device to your friends and family. And the idea here is that when you're being lazy, your friends and family are notified, and they're able to send you a digital poke to try to get you up and moving around. So if you're one Sunday you're laying around on the couch watching football, this device notifies your friends and family, and they can try to get you to get up and get moving about. So according to Mark Payne of Fahrenheit 212, roughly 90% of all new ideas will fail. And what he says is that to avoid this, you expose ideas to the tough love of tough questions. So here at Slingshot, we practice an alternative approach here. And what we've done over the last several years is to incorporate Lean UX into our day-to-day work. And what this does for us is that it reduces the likelihood of our customers experiencing failure. And the way it does that is by, number one, engaging and learning from the target customer firsthand. Second is that we spend a lot of time early on in a project visualizing success. So we want to know what are the key critical metrics that we need to take a look at and monitor as we're progressing through the project. We test and adjust early and often throughout the project, and we typically do this through prototyping, which I'll talk a lot more about here later. We like to start small. So starting small for us may mean conducting an experiment or building a simple prototype and putting it in front of the target customer, limiting the feature set to really the key, critical, meaningful features. And last, we are okay with success, meaning that we are not going to build the solution. If we get out there and spend time with the customer and realize that the problem really isn't a problem that's worth solving, we're okay with stopping the project and informing our customer that it isn't worth pursuing. Some highlights of Lean UX include early and continuous focus on user value. A typical project for us here at Slingshot, we are engaging with the target customer within the first week. It's hypothesis driven. I'll give you an example of how to create an effective hypothesis a bit later. It introduces this new concept of a minimum viable product, or MVP. Prior to my experience with Lean UX, the only MVP I was aware of was most valuable player. You have validated learning, which you obtain through iterating on this new concept called a build, measure, learn loop. It's a feedback loop that was introduced with Lean. And last, and probably most important, is that it's adaptive, collaborative, and nimble. So when we say collaborative, what we mean there is that we're collaborating with the target customer. We're also, as a team, collaborating with strategists, designers, and developers internally within Slingshot. So this feedback loop that was introduced with Lean is called the build, measure, learn loop, and it's a fairly simple concept. You basically build a product, your MVP, you put it out in the market with your actual target customer. You learn from that, you measure their response to that product, you learn from it, and then you pivot or persevere. And persevere just basically means you got it all right and you're going to continue on executing your project. You know, the customer likes what they're getting, you're solving their problem, they like the solution. That's fairly uncommon. Typically what you end up doing is pivoting to some extent. A lot of times if you're a pivot could take the form of some additional features, changing a feature. You know, maybe you didn't get it quite right, you need to tweak it. Pivot could also mean that your pricing, you know, the price that you thought the customer was willing to pay wasn't right. They can also be as great as maybe you had the wrong target customer altogether. You know, you got out there in the market, you tested with this product and you realized that, you know what, I have the wrong person. I need to, but I think this idea is still viable. I just think my target customer is this other guy. And then last, a pivot could mean that you've gotten out there in the market, you tested your idea, and you realize that it's not worth pursuing. The problem isn't as big of a problem as maybe you initially thought. So let's talk a little bit about an MVP, a minimum viable product. According to Eric Ries, the author of the Lean Startup, the guy that started this whole initiative, it isn't necessarily the smallest product imaginable. It is simply the fastest way to get through the build, measure, learn feedback loop with the minimum amount of effort. So MVPs can take a number of different forms. They can be a simple landing page that describes the product. Maybe you have a landing page with an introductory video, and it also incorporates a email sign up. And what you're doing there is you're putting the idea out there. Actually, this is how Dropbox got started. They put the idea out there, had an introductory video, and then had the potential customers sign up. You know, say if you're interested, give us your email, and we'll let you know when this product's ready for a release. And what you can do there is it's really powerful because you can get immediate feedback. Are people actually interested in this thing? Is this a problem worth solving? Here at Slingshot, typically an MVP for us is a prototype. There's a number of different tools out there. When we say prototype, it's very lightweight, it's easy, doesn't involve developers. It's a fast, simple way for us to get an idea out in front of the target customer and make it look real so we can measure feedback that way. So if we were to go back to the B-Twine activity tracker, had these guys came to Slingshot, what we would have done is likely create a landing page, an intro video, and incorporate in an email sign up and just gauge interest in this. Do people really want this type of product out there? I mean, as you can imagine, if you were to just skip all of that and go straight to production, you're going to not only have to write some expensive software, but you're also going to be building some expensive hardware in the form of a wearable. So in this case, we would want that customer to spend some time up front and engage overall interest. So what we do here at Slingshot is after we spend some time with the customer, understand the problem that they intend to solve, we begin a phase called discovery. And what discovery includes is understanding your target customer. We want to know who is the target customer. Who is it that we want to spend some time with to get to know and to get into their world. And then we transition to problem discovery. And this typically just means getting out into the field. You know, we want to experience that problem firsthand and see how the target customer is dealing with that problem today. After we gain some good understanding of that, we start to develop key metrics. We understand what does success look like? What do we think we could change? What will that look like? And then later in discovery, we begin to brainstorm, and this is where ideas begin to flow. You know, we've experienced that problem firsthand. We now know the customer. We know some of the key metrics, and we sit down as a team and we start to throw different ideas up on the board of you know, in the software world, those typically take the form of features. So as a team, we start to post up various different features that we think would be meaningful. And then from there, we start to think about, well, what sort of experiment do we need? How do we take the next step and engage that customer, the target customer, and get to know whether or not our idea for the solution is what they need to solve that problem. So here at Slingshot, we've, as far as experiments go, we've done everything from landing pages, simple landing pages with email signups, brochures. We've actually created some brochures that have been passed out with some contact information. But more often than not, our experiment is in the form of a prototype. So with discovery, one of the very first things that we conduct is field research. And what this means is getting out of the office into the field with the target customer. We want to get to know that target customer firsthand. We want to understand their process, how they're dealing with that problem that you intend to solve today. This involves by getting out there with the target customer, and let's say it's a B2B product or a business to business type product, and you want to get in their office. You want to be in their office space and see firsthand any sort of workarounds or tricks that they may have. We're taking notes about it, emotions, beliefs, distractions. There's a lot of times where you'll sit at the desk with that target customer and you'll see that they're distracted very often throughout the day. We want to get to know their work environment. Do they have 2 monitors? Are they using an iPad, an iPhone, an Android device? We take note of that. Personality cues. We want to know that target customer firsthand. We want to get to know their personality, and this helps with persona development later on. So we want to be able to kind of get to know just the general personality of our target customer. And then last, tools. Especially when it comes to B2B products. How are they working around that problem today? Are they using Excel or numbers or what sort of third-party tools are they using today? Because your target customer, typically if they have a challenge, they're very experienced, they've generally found some ways on their own to make that problem less of a challenge for them. So some tips and tricks for field research, and this is how we conduct it today. These are things that we've learned that help make this more effective. And number one, most important thing is you have to ask the right questions. So in order to do that, before we conduct field research, we'll sit down as a team with subject matter experts, and just the people that know the problem, that our customer, and we'll start to jot down what things do we not know? What do we need to learn from these guys? And that will take the form of a discussion guide. And it really is just a guide, but for every field research interview that we conduct, we want to have kind of a consistent approach, and that we want to ask a series of consistent questions, and that's where this discussion guide really comes into play. The other thing that we do is we always conduct field research with a pair, with 2 people, and each person has their own distinct role. You have one person that's leading the interview. We do this because, if you've ever experienced a job interview where you're sitting across the table from 3 or 4 people and they're asking you various different unrelated questions, it's exhausting. It's hard to focus, and we don't want to have that happen. When we do these field research interviews, we want it to be more of an open discussion. We want to get them in the flow and just have them feel comfortable with talking to us, and that means eye-to-eye contact and just getting that discussion going. So we do the pair approach, and that means one person conducting the interview, leading the discussion, another one taking notes. We always keep them less than an hour. I would say 30 minutes typically. You start to lose people after that amount of time. We do these, as I mentioned before, we want to do these in the field or at the desk. We want to be right there in their environment. And then last, if possible, we want to record. It's you can record the audio. If you can take some pictures of their desk environment, if they let you do that, those are all very valuable. That's very valuable information that you want to have. So what we're doing with field research is that we want to spend enough time with the target customer that we're able to develop empathy. We're able to feel their pain firsthand. So after finishing field research, we'll come back to the office and we'll spend time documenting what we've learned. And we always do it with an approach similar to this. We want to get it all on the wall, all together. And the main reason for this is that we want to pick up on trends. So if we've interviewed 10 different people out in the field, then you'll have all 10 lined up here, and we'll go through and synthesize our notes, which means that we'll look through all of our notes and pick out the key points, the most meaningful stuff. And what you'll have here is everything, process related, things that we've learned, personality cues. What do we learn about the role and the people, their background, their experience. So we'll list all of this up on the board, and then we'll start to analyze it. If it's a B2B product, typically what you'll have along the bottom here is the actual workflow that we learned about. So the most important thing is taking all of those interviews, getting them up on the board side by side so that you can look at it from kind of a macro level and pick up on those key trends. So to give you some examples of our recent projects, these are notes that we took related to a claims processing system. And by conducting field research, we were able to pick up on the way that they were storing documents. It was a very complex filing system. A key metric that we learned about is that they were burning through a tree a week of paper, which is an interesting metric. We were able to put them on a paperless system, so we're basically saving a tree a week. And then another thing that we learned here was that all of the claims adjusters were previously in veterinary roles, which is interesting. So they're able to look at the claim that was submitted and understand it from a medical standpoint. So here's another project that we completed with Lurie's Children's Hospital. And in this case, we interviewed a number of doctors, EMS, a number of different medical roles, and this is related to child abuse. So what we learned, a couple of key things was number one, that EMS had the ability to reroute patients when they suspected abuse, which obviously had an impact on our solution. We learned that resident doctors were our most likely users of the application. Another key thing, we were building a mobile app, and by conducting field research, we learned that phones are generally not allowed on the floor, which is pretty critical. And then last, the speed of assessing a case is critical. You're in an emergency department, so these doctors, they don't have a lot of time to spend with each patient. This is a project that we completed for police officers, and the actual application provides a means for police officers to get off-duty work, like directing traffic or security for a neighborhood or what have you. So this product had been around for 10 plus years in the form of a website, and by conducting field research, we had the officers come into the office and show us how they use the app. And what we learned there was that they were all accessing the website from their mobile device, and this website was very difficult to use. Most looked for a handful of favorite companies, so they had companies that they liked working for, and they most of the time when they would get into the website, they would go right for those companies and see if they had any open positions. They had a keen interest in knowing their year-to-date earnings, and that was for tax prep purposes. So they wanted to know when they got to a certain threshold. A lot of the guys would work enough to earn money to take a vacation, and at that point they would stop working. And then we also learned that the competitors to this company were not reliable from a pay standpoint to the officers. So they had a huge advantage when compared to competitors. So one of the things that you end up with when you conduct field research, keep in mind you're talking to these customers firsthand. You get to know their personality. And when in discovery, as you've finished up field research, you've went through all of your notes, you understand the problem firsthand, you also understand your target customer in a lot more detail. So you can, one thing that we like to do here at Slingshot is to develop personas. And personas are basically fictitious users. But what this gives you, typically you'll have an age range, you'll have whether or not they're tech savvy, you have their goals, frustrations, you can write a fictitious bio, but you give them an actual name and a picture, a photo. And for the remainder of the project, we can refer to Sarah, we can refer to our persona, and the entire project team knows who we're talking about. So it just gives you a way of putting a face to that user that you're solving a problem for. So in Discover, we also spend a lot of time developing features. As we understand the problem, we start to dream up various different features for solving the problem. And one of the challenges that you inevitably have is narrowing that feature set. Most projects come with a budget, so you can't build everything that you dream up. And this is a technique that has proven very effective for us, where we will create a matrix of value to complexity. And we'll take all of our feature ideas and align them to one of the four matrix areas. And so what you'll do is on the left, you'll have business value from low to high. Across the bottom, you'll have complexity from low to high. And complexity just means just difficulty, or typically means it's that features. If you have high complexity, it's going to be more costly to build that particular feature. So we'll chart all of our features within this matrix. Anything that's in the high business value, low complexity, clearly you're going to build those features. Anything that falls in the high business value but is still highly complex, I mean, typically most projects have a few of these. I mean, you're not, otherwise the problem would have been solved some time back. So you're going to have to do some of these. So that's your priority too. But anything that falls in the low value, meaning that it's of low value from a business standpoint, but it's highly complex, clearly you don't want to build those. I mentioned previously that Lean UX, it's hypothesis driven. And this is how we create hypothesis here at Slingshot. So we'll take our features. You have your persona developed at this point. We'll give some thought to business outcomes and metrics. And basically a hypothesis aligns these four things together. So building this feature, we want to be able to state that building this feature for this persona will achieve this business outcome. And we'll know that to be true when we see this quantitative measure. This is an example of some hypotheses that we created for a recent project. So you can see on the left, we have all of our various different features. In the middle, we've aligned those features to the business outcome that we expect to get by building those features. And then to the right, we have our metrics. And one technique that we'll use that isn't illustrated here is that we'll do these independent of one another. So we'll dream up all of our features. We'll put that one kind of cloud of Post-its. We'll then give some thought to, well, if we do this project, what kind of business outcome? What are our business outcomes? What do we think we're going to impact? And those really could be business outcomes or even persona level outcomes. So we'll create a cloud of the various different outcomes that we think we'll achieve by completing this project. And then last, we'll create a cloud of metrics that we think are really important to this project. And building our hypothesis is basically taking those three clouds and aligning them to one another. And inevitably, you'll end up with holes. You know, you'll have these features here at the bottom that have no business outcome. And what that tells you is that maybe you've forgotten a business outcome, or maybe those features don't need to be built at all. You know, there's not really a solid business or persona level outcome that you'll be able to achieve there. So talking about metrics, metrics are interesting. They are typically left out. You know, I think just based on experience as a consultant, a lot of times companies don't think about this. They don't think about what success looks like. They don't know how to measure for it. They'll just start building a project and basically hope for the best. We don't like to do that here. And with Lean UX, metrics are critical. So building good metrics sometimes can be a bit challenging. And these are some of the things that we'll look for. One is that they have to be easy to measure. You know, you don't want to base metrics on feedback from the customer, you know, like on Google, where you leave qualitative feedback, whether or not you liked a particular product. We don't want to base our metrics on that. They need to be easy to measure, quantifiable, things that we can quantify, actionable. And what we mean by that is that when you see this particular metric, it's kind of a call to action. It's that meaningful. You know, when you see it, you're either very happy or you're very sad and you want to make some changes to get it better. And predictive, what we mean here is that assuming that you change nothing, you can assume that that metric is going to continue to be the way it is, at the level it is. So changing nothing, you can assume that it's going to remain the same. All right, so we've developed our hypothesis, we've detailed out our metrics, and now here at Slingshot, our next step is to conduct what we call a design studio. And that's basically the design team sitting around the table. And it's key that we've all been involved in, and we've all at this point spoken firsthand with the target customer. We've been involved in field research. So we know the problem firsthand, but we start to kind of dream up various different solutions. We have some ideas on key features, and those features now begin to take form and take shape in the form of screens and the overall user experience that we are going to test with that customer in the future. So we'll end up with something that looks like this. We each are hand drawing what we think are great ideas, presenting it to the team, and then we iterate on that several times until we start to narrow the focus down to kind of a common design that we want to roll with. We'll take those common designs and then advance to prototyping. And prototyping for us it doesn't involve development in any way. We use tools. There's a lot of tools out there today like Envision and Proto.io that make this really easy to do, and it's something that we do within the design team in the design phase of the project. They're powerful. They give you the ability to sell an idea. So if you work for a big corporation, then you're able to take your solution concept and maybe sell it to the board to get some investment dollars or what have you. They help you with gauging feasibility. So your technology team can look at your proposed designs and call out any particular challenges that they may see there. They give you, I would say the greatest benefit is they give you the ability to test your idea. So what we're doing here at Slingshot, when we design our prototype, is our intent is to take that prototype and put it back in front of the target customer and see how they react to it with user testing. So by doing that, you're accelerating feedback. Before we write the first line of code, and typically for a project with us, 3-4 weeks into the project, we are developing these prototypes. Probably 4 or 5 weeks, we are back in front of that target customer testing our prototype concepts. And then last, they reduce build costs. What if when you go to prototype, your customer doesn't see the value in that particular solution, or they like what they see, but there are certain things that would make it so much better. Or you have features in your prototype that just aren't really necessary. So that it gives you the ability to kind of reduce cost and narrow your feature set to the critical features. So we take our prototype, we have our prototype built, and now we're ready to get out and conduct user testing. And what we do here is we're taking our prototype and we're setting up some real world scenarios, and we're putting that in front of the target customer, and we're measuring how effective that solution is. Will it solve the problem from the customer standpoint? How well are they with recall once they see that prototype and experience it for the first time? Are they able to, on subsequent attempts with the prototype, are they able to recall a lot of the overall user experience? And then last, emotional response. We take notes about how they respond to our proposed solution emotionally. And some of the tips and tricks that we have for user testing include, number one, with some projects you'll have more than one persona. So you want to make sure that you're user testing with all personas. You want to record responses. And when it comes to user testing, you really want to record how they are navigating. So let's say you're building an iPhone or Android app. You want to record where they're touching on the screen, because that gives you a lot of good feedback. You want to record their face, their emotional response to what you're putting in front of them. Do they look confused? Do they look happy? Angry? You also want to spend time before conducting user testing developing your scenarios. You want to kind of set the stage for the user. You want to get them in kind of a real world line of thinking, give them a scenario, then give them the prototype and see how they execute that scenario within your prototype. And then last and most important is you never want to lead the user. So when we conduct user testing, a lot of times you'll have quite a bit of dead air, where your target user is looking at, evaluating what you put in front of them. You want to take note of that. When it may mean that what your screen design is too complex, too verbose maybe, but you don't want to lead the user. You want to let them experience the prototype and just take note of it. So if we were to go back to that 3rd generation iPod Shuffle, had Apple conducted extensive user testing like we do with Lean UX, I believe that recall would have been a problem. I actually owned one of these things, and I would have no idea how to advance to the next track or go back or what. It's very challenging. So recall would be a problem. I think from an emotional response standpoint, you probably would have seen a lot of confusion from people as they're reading that manual and trying to navigate throughout their music. So with Lean UX, it basically flows like this. You have your raw idea. You get out from behind your desk, get out in the field, spend some time with the target customer, conduct your research. You come back, you brainstorm. So you dream up your features, consider what are your key metrics, develop your hypothesis. You then prototype, you create your prototype, you get out there and conduct user testing. And you can see at the center here, we have the build, measure, learn loop. So here at Slingshot, we're building a software product. So our first iteration through this build, measure, learn loop is typically with a prototype. So we're iterating on our prototype. Each time we get back out in the field and test that prototype, it gets closer and closer to what will ultimately be the final solution. And then by iterating on this build, measure, learn loop, we're pivoting or persevering. So if we're getting good feedback on certain features, we keep them. If we're getting confused or the target user is confused about certain features, we pivot. We change them, enhance them, maybe throw them out. Some of the key benefits of Lean UX include learning quickly. Here at Slingshot, we get out in the field with the target customer within the first week of the project. You measure real customer behavior rather than focus groups. You actually become closer to your customer. You're out in the field, you're spending time with them at their desk in some cases. You're focused on actionable metrics rather than vanity metrics. And then last, you're comfortable with pivoting. So if you have a particular project and you conduct your discovery, your field research, and realize that that problem just isn't worth solving, you cancel the project and move on to the next great idea. Thanks for watching our presentation. If you have questions or you want to follow up, you can find us at whyslingshot.com.